Okay, here we are. Yet another Ask Us Anything session with us, meaning me, and Dan in the background, hiding. He might appear, you never know. Sorry for that. Okay, so today's session is all about your questions. No prepared material, just answering questions. If there are no questions, we're going to stop right away. Actually, there are questions already pouring in. So that's fantastic. Before we start, very quick marketing stuff. You need to like the video. You need to subscribe to the channel. Oh, why is this not appearing on the screen? I don't know. Something wrong with my animations over there. So I'm not showing you the animations. Just subscribe, like the video, do the stuff you usually do. And we have also, what do we have? We have a couple of new members. There's, I mean, we have quite a few new members, but Jack just joined, and Noko Doko, if I'm pronouncing it right, also became a member. So thank you both. I mean, thank you everybody. No, not only two of you. Two of you just joined. So let's go with the questions. Let's see. What are you going to torture me with today? Alex, can I use Network CNI as a full network security solution? I plan to expose my Kubernetes nodes on a public subnet with a public IP and just have a Network CNI keep me secured. Yes, you can. I mean, of course, the most secure thing is to just not be on a public network. But if you are, then I would strongly recommend Cilium. It's an eBPF-based solution. It has a lot of features that are security-focused, and it works really well. And I think it's actually even available in quite a few managed Kubernetes solutions. I'm not sure exactly what are all the providers giving it out of the box or as optional add-on, but it's there. It's fantastic. Use Cilium or start with Cilium. ChatGPT, I think it's extremely impressive. Now, to be honest, I'm not using it much. I find it more comfortable to use GitHub Copilot, mostly because it's integrated into my Visual Studio Code. But if I'm not mistaken, both ChatGPT and Copilot are based on OpenAPI. So similar, if not the same engine behind the scenes, with different data sets, of course, and so it's not really exactly the same. But I personally I completely rely on not on ChatGPT, but on GitHub Copilot, which again should be similar. Sravan, what could be a great career in coming days for DevOps, like having a knowledge, little with cloud, somewhat with Kubernetes, and basic understanding of Java? Yeah, so cloud, Kubernetes, and pick your favorite programming language is a combination, the winning combination. I mean, of course, it depends on a company where you land, right? You might end up in a company that is fully on-prem, then hey, knowledge of cloud is not that helpful. And you might end up in a company that doesn't want to use Kubernetes or cannot use Kubernetes. So then Kubernetes is not helpful, but those might be the companies you don't want to start your career in, right? If you're already there, that's fine, but not necessarily this place you want to start. So you're on a good track. The only thing that Java is fantastic, but not necessarily the first choice when talking about DevOps type of tooling. You definitely need to learn Bash scripting, the most basic of all. So learn Bash and maybe something a bit more dynamic, like Python, or something that is today a majority choice for a close to system type of programming would be Rust or Go. But the important thing is that you know how to write code in something, and then expanding it's easy. Anthos, I haven't used Anthos much. I mean, I have very rudimentary experience with Anthos, so I cannot comment on it, really. I know that Google itself is really trying to rethink what Anthos is. I don't think that it's been as wild of a success as Google hoped. But again, I'm not that experienced with it, so cannot comment. Sorry for that. Locky versus OpenSearch versus what do you recommend for logging and what about log shipping, FluentBit or FluentD? I tend to use Locky myself. I'm a huge fan of everything coming from Grafana Labs. So Locky is the storage for your logs. And I tend to use FluentD as the one shipping logs. I will probably start rewriting my applications to use to write logs as OpenTelemetry. That's now on an instrumentation side, but logs are the part of OpenTelemetry that is more behind than other types of data metrics. So it might be a bit still too early, but my logs will be written in OpenTelemetry not long from now. Okay, I'm going very fast. We're gonna finish sooner than later. I'm working 1 year with Azure DevOps and Azure Portal. Can you tell me where I can find freelance job to earn money behind my main job? I honestly don't know. I've been working, I've been fully employed in companies for a very, very long time. So when gigs are in question, I'm not the person who really knows where to find them. Sorry for that. Oh, operator. Now, sometimes I say I don't know, so I don't answer the question. But in this case, I do know the answer, or I have the answer, not that I know. But I'm not going to give it, operator. Mostly because 2 weeks from now, I have a video specifically on the top tools of 2023. So if I answer it now, I would ruin the fun. So 10 days, Monday after next, is the video on that answers that question. I'm going to keep you in suspense, operator.
Not only that, the podcast this week that came out yesterday.
Oh yeah, the podcast
is about that.
this week. Yeah, there we go.
So
there's the voice of a ghost in the background.
If you haven't listened to the podcast yet this week, do that.
There we go. Miroslav, every now and then some post shows up that we shouldn't use CPU limits. Your opinion on that? I'm not sure that I fully grasped the argument for not using CPU limits. So I'm using them myself. I know the posts. I know that they are mostly coming from the same group of people. But I did not dive into it deep enough to grasp what's so horrible about using CPU limits. So I'm not up to date. Sorry for that. Will it be wise to switch from front-end software development, 1 year experience, to DevOps in the current market? I don't think that it's wiser to be in one area than the other. It's kind of like, hey, if we are a front-end developers, then we are losing jobs, and if we are DevOps, we are getting jobs, and the other way around. There is a strong need for front-end developers. There is strong need for operational developers, platform engineers, DevOps, whatever you want to call it these days. And for quite a few others, right? As for the demand, there is definitely demand for both. I wouldn't use that as criteria to choose to switch or not. What I think is more important is what you're passionate about, what fulfills you more. So I always recommend do what within software industry, choose what fulfills you rather than what might be a bigger opportunity. Because even if it's bigger opportunity for one over the other today, it will change tomorrow, and so on and so forth. So whatever is more interesting to you will make you grow faster and will provide through that growth, more opportunities. Alex says, also loving the YouTube shorts. So thank you so much for that, Alex. Thank you. I'm really very grateful because I'm still trying to figure out whether I'm wasting my time with shorts or that's useful to people. I'll probably keep it for a while longer and then decide. But hey, if you say you love it, and I heard from some other people that they like it, then that means that it's here to stay. Thank you so much for that comment. Martin, separate Kubernetes manifests and application source code to different Git repo is the best way using Argo CD. I mean, there is no written in stone rule about that. Personally, I prefer keeping Kubernetes manifests in the same repo of the application because instead of thinking in terms like, hey, this is the type of manifest, that is the type of this or that, I tend to think in terms of life cycle, right? Application has one life cycle, and this cluster, for example, has a different life cycle, and I keep them in different repositories. But everything related to application, I personally prefer to keep in the repo of the application because that simplifies many, many things from my perspective. Like, for example, let's say that I'm developing locally. And I develop and I would like to use some development environment like Octet or DevSpace or Tilt, right? And that development environment is going to ask me for Kubernetes manifest so that it can develop, so it can deploy my application and sync it to wherever that development environment is, remote or local. Now, if those manifests are somewhere else, it can be done, but then you're complicating it, right? Personally, I don't see a much big of a difference between, let's say, tools that build binaries, Dockerfile, and Kubernetes manifests, right? Both are tightly coupled to an application. And if one keeps Dockerfile in the same repo as application, I don't see the reason not to keep manifests themselves. Now, that being said, when using Argo CD and Flux, I do keep those manifests outside of the repo of the application, right? So I would have manifests of the application in the repository of the application itself, and then I would have a separate repository, let's call it production, where I have all the Argo CD manifests that are each pointing to a different set of manifests in a different repository of an application. So Argo CD files out, manifest themselves into the repo of application. That's my personal preference. Other people use it differently. Can you recommend a FinOps tool for monitoring and managing cloud usage? Yes, there is KubeCost. KubeCost is great if you are focused on Kubernetes. And the other one, my brain stopped. Maybe Darren remembers the name.
Zesty?
Zesty, for example. Exactly,
Oh.
Zesty. There we go.
From a commercial perspective, yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that most of them are commercial. Even KubeCost, which is open source, really is very limited and a bit complicated when used as pure open source. But to me, that's an example of something that makes perfect sense to use a commercial solution because what you're paying is directly related to what you're saving. So it's a very simple calculation. Hey, I'm paying this much, I'm saving this much. If what I'm saving is higher than what I'm paying, then it's worth it, right? How complex of programs can you get containerized? I think it might be a wrong question. It's not about the complexity of each individual program or application. It's more about complexity of a system itself. And, you know, assume that when you say containerized, you mean containerized then in Kubernetes. The thing that is happening with Kubernetes, I mean, it was happening before Kubernetes as well, but it's very, very common in Kubernetes is that everything that is not pure business logic of an application is moved out. right? So applications themselves are becoming much simpler because many of the things that we were traditionally doing within the code base of application is now outside. Like mutual TLS between applications, certificates, all that stuff, out, right? Service discovery, out, and so on and so forth. So we do all those operations outside applications themselves. That means that applications are becoming much simpler. The system is not getting simpler, just to clarify. Overall system is not, but application programs themselves are getting simpler and simpler and simpler. Now, if by complex, if you can give me an example of a complex application, that would help me answer that. I'm imagining something like WebSphere type of complex. If that's the case, then it might not be the best case to containerize it because you would be putting into containers some of the things that can run in containers, but are actually intended to be running outside. Like WebSphere and WebLogic, I'm just the first example that comes to my mind. They're designed in a way with somehow overlapping goals of Kubernetes and containers. So in that case, it might not be a best idea, but we ignoring now what is a good idea and what is a bad idea, there is not much of a limit what you can put in a container. Whether it's a good idea, that's a different question. I've been looking from Gavalli. I've been looking into secret managers and trying to do a POC on secret manager, where my requirement is to version control encrypted secret in a GitHub repo, okay, encrypted using SOAPs or Bitnami Sans sealed secret itself. Then use separate repo for storing application values, okay. Okay, then it continues. Cool. What was, yeah,
No,
go,
that was
let's go to
it.
the next one.
I think that
was it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there is a question over there.
Let me check here. Hang on a second.
So, let's see.
Oh, no, it is. This is the final.
Okay, while releasing an application, we should be able to mesh in the secret release version. Git tag from secret repo indicates some GitOps tool says Flux, Argo, pick up those manifests and apply them. Again, I'm a bit confused as to what the question is.
Well, let's
yes,
not worry about the
want to
question for
keep
just a sec. Let's just try to answer it from a secrets perspective. So in today, 2023, should we still be using sealed secrets?
If the goal is to keep the secrets in the Git repo, then yes. If the goal is to keep secrets somewhere else, then no. Then I would probably go with external secrets or directly Vault operator, right? If you're using Vault, but there are other solutions. But let's say if you want something general purpose for secrets that are not in a Git repository, external secrets. If it's secrets that are in a Git repository, then external secrets, sealed secrets work great. SOPs works fine as well. A lot of on-prem Windows containers for a shared environment, relatively little containers expertise, Kubernetes or Nomad. HashiCorp insists Nomad is the right choice. I don't think it's the right choice. And my arguments for not being a right choice are probably very different from arguments of, let's say, HashiCorp and people who like Nomad. Because very often people will tell you, hey, Nomad is easier, or Nomad is better at this, or better for this, and so on and so forth. A lot of technical arguments. And if we were discussing this, let's say, 5 years ago, I would actually enter into that discussion, and I think that that would be a valid discussion. We would probably put Docker Swarm into the mix and Mesos, and then talk about the 4 of them. Today, the reasons, technical reasons why one is a better choice than the other, to me, are irrelevant for a simple reason, and that reason is that almost everybody chose Kubernetes as the base platform upon which they're going to build their own solutions. And right now, I'm talking about projects and vendors, right? So almost all innovation happening right now is happening on top of Kubernetes. That means that if you're using Nomad, you're missing out on vast majority of what is happening in this space right now, right? Yeah, almost nobody is developing something. Almost nobody who is not HashiCorp is developing a solution that will help you somehow with something, and that solution running Nomad. So you're basically limited mostly to HashiCorp's capabilities to provide you with everything. While Kubernetes, your limits is the whole software industry, right? There is hardly any company right now that is, and I'm talking about software vendors, that is not developing their next generation or current generation of whatever they're having with Kubernetes at least in mind, many of them even as Kubernetes native, right? So you would be missing on so many things. That's my argument against Nomad. Not that it's better or worse than Kubernetes. Milos, what do you think about logging operator from Banzai Cloud? I haven't used it. It's embarrassing when I say I haven't used something, but there are things I haven't used, and that's one of them. I'm sorry for that, Milos. Ljubomir, I'm sorry also if I butcher your names. It's hard to know how to pronounce them. Argo CD constantly shows that some resources secrets which automatically refresh periodically are out of sync. How to deal with those? So you can deal with those by telling Argo CD in the Argo CD application manifest which fields to exclude. Very often Argo CD excludes some things automatically, but those are the commonly used things like Kubernetes deployment and things like that. If it shows UI probably for something special, let's call it, like secrets. I'm assuming that it's not Kubernetes secrets, but secrets through something else or managed by something else. You need to tell Argo CD which fields to exclude. Like maybe some process is adding labels to your secrets, for example, or things like that, right? So exclude fields that are being updated outside Argo CD. I'm guessing. Now, I don't know the exact situation you're having though. From Sravan, I have done CKA certification earlier. Great. I have working experience with AWS. Great, but I'm thinking of doing a certificate in GCP. Do you think that GCP will come up in industry usage? I want to place my bet with learning GCP, but I have doubt which cloud I should pick up. Will it be wiser to go with GCP, anticipating this market get better in coming days? So I'm skeptical that Google Cloud will grow to become bigger in any near future than Azure or AWS, right? I don't think that that's likely going to happen. It's not growing, it's growing. And as a matter of fact, most of the startups I know and work with, they prefer GCP, but in bigger companies, AWS and Azure are the dominating players. So if your question is, which one has a bigger demand with ignoring the offer, then GCP is the third place, without a doubt, right? Now, if you compare with the demand, with the offer, like, hey, what is the number of, how many companies need bank log provider over the other, divided by the number of people who know one or the other, then I don't know the answer. But generally speaking, I don't think it's a big deal if you know one or the other, to be honest. Because once you figure out one, especially if you figure out AWS and you have a working experience, jumping from AWS to Google Cloud is relatively easy and straightforward, or even there is always something to be learned and things like that, right? But difficult jump is really to the first cloud and doing it seriously. After that, it becomes easier. So, Alex, service mesh you recommend. Are there things to be aware of when creating a cluster that makes rolling a service mesh out later harder? Naming conventions or in the network CNI to consider? I mean, network CNI, if you're using something that is not already provided by your provider, then Cilium. And service mesh, the two dominating players and kind of relatively safe bets today are Linkerd and Istio. That's what vast majority of the market is today, and both are great. I think that Cilium might be the next big thing in service mesh. That's my wild guess. Mostly because of their focus on eBPF, because I think that the next change in service mesh will be that they will be abandoning sidecars in favor of eBPF, and Cilium tends to be ahead of the curve on that one. Not that others are not doing it. Istio also started the work, and it's already well into it. But yeah, today, without ignoring future Cilium, Istio, Linkerd, and Cilium for networking. And when I say Cilium, in half of the context, I meant Cilium is becoming service mesh, not only networking. Okay. Suz, I'm about to work in Kubernetes, EKS in production, as my team is migrating from old systems, but I feel overwhelmed as I have never worked in prod with Kubernetes. Any advice? You feel overwhelmed because it is overwhelming. That's the thing. Kubernetes is huge. It's massive. It's never ending because it's not only Kubernetes, right? Once you stop feeling overwhelmed by EKS alone, you will be overwhelmed with all the things that we put on top of it, like service mesh that I was talking about, and progressive delivery, and pipelines, and policies, and control planes, and so on and so forth. So it's a never-ending story. I am overwhelmed all the time. So if you're overwhelmed, that's normal. The only thing I can say is don't go crazy. Don't go into, hey, I'm going to do all the things that we just mentioned today all at once. Start with the basic Kubernetes, which is EKS. EKS is more or less almost the same as the core Kubernetes. Not much additional is happening over there. When you feel comfortable, then you expand and expand and expand. Kind of you pick a subject. Next, I'm going to deal with, once I feel comfortable with Kubernetes alone, I'm going to deal with service mesh. After that, I'm going to deal with policies. But it's going to continue being overwhelming.
One thing you consider there.
Just to clarify.
Go ahead.
Say again?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
To clarify what I meant by overwhelming, it's overwhelming because the amount of things we can do is overwhelming, right? The things that we couldn't do in the past, right? If you can easily be not overwhelmed by saying I'm going to do in Kubernetes not much more than what I was doing before Kubernetes, then it's not overwhelming. You were saying something.
Yeah, now that
Darin.
EKS Anywhere, you can run it single node. Now you can work with it locally, if you will. It still has some high thing, but at least if you wanted to play with it, now it's easier to work with just EKS as a standalone.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that might be more important maybe a bit later when you start looking into something very specific for EKS, right? At the beginning, it's not really, the overwhelming part is not the difference between EKS and Kubernetes itself. It's probably Kubernetes itself. So kind of you can just as well practice with EKS Anywhere, great, but Docker Desktop, Rancher Desktop, Minikube, all of those are giving you 95% of the same. Alex, have you used NetApp Spot? I'm considering it as a full replacement for Autoscaler. No, I haven't. Sorry for that. I did use the last one that I used. I mean, the last one that I was impressed related to autoscaling is SCADA. SCADA is absolutely fantastic. Assuming that you're talking about application autoscaling. Okay. Is cloud skills the main skill needed for DevOps engineer? Aside from other side skills like infrastructure as code, Docker, Kubernetes, etc., etc., etc. Yes. I think that companies running in cloud are more likely to be closer to the edge. And when I say edge, I don't mean now edge computing. I mean edge, technological edge. So those things usually go together. There are percentage of cloud users using Kubernetes is higher than percentage of on-prem users using Kubernetes. Similar thing like infrastructure as code is much more commonly used in cloud than in on-prem, where we are still, in on-prem is still dominating factor is typically configuration management. Think of it as a father of infrastructure as code. Similar objective, similar thing, but more focused on on-prem, like Ansible. So yeah, cloud, Kubernetes, infrastructure as code, they go very well together. Okay, Alex, what HashiCorp projects do you think could go away at this point? Sounds like Nomad is one. Vault seems to tie in well to Kubernetes, especially given it has a nice UI, but still thoughts. So Vault is effectively the de facto standard in the industry in Kubernetes and out of Kubernetes for secrets management. The only threat to Vault is not really from other tools that allow it to manage secret, but more from services native to cloud providers, like whatever AWS secret manager is called, and same thing for Google and so on and so forth. So yeah, Vault is here to stay. The others are at best status quo, like Nomad, at best status quo. I don't think that they're gonna be expanding it. What else? We have Vagrant. I haven't used Vagrant for many, many years, and I don't remember the last time I heard somebody using Vagrant. Darin is probably gonna jump in right now and say,
I use Vagrant every day.
There we go. But so the thing with HashiCorp is that they have amazing tools. I love HashiCorp. It's one of my favorite companies. It's just that I don't think that the tools, like Vagrant is still very useful for many, but I don't think that its usage kind of like, it's growing, right? I might be wrong. So if you use Cluster API, you will be using Vagrant and Packer. If you're using on-prem and building your images. So they're all great tools. But the only one that if HashiCorp would break into different companies, one for each product, and you would ask me, where will you invest your hard-earned cash as investment? I would say Vault. That would be my bet for HashiCorp. And the second one would be Terraform. Oh, Gavali gave a super sticker. Thank you so much, Gavali. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Marcelo, hi. How can I impersonate a service account for Terraform in GCP? The documentation is not good. It's been a while since I used seriously Terraform, so I cannot answer that question. Since I jumped into Crossplane, I haven't been using Terraform for almost at all. So I'm not a good person to answer that question. Sorry for that. What else do we have?
I'm looking.
No worries. By the way, well, okay, there we go. No, it's okay. I have done CKA. Is it fair to do CK?
Maybe CKAD would be the next one.
Maybe. So again, I'm not good person because I haven't done certification for anything for a very long time. So I cannot say really. if I apply the same logic I had with certifications I did in the past, a long time ago, I think that they were very worth it at the beginning of my career, where I could not really convince people that I'm amazing because of my 20 years of experience in serious companies. So certifications were very, very helpful back then. I don't know whether they're equally helpful today, especially for newbies. I'm not doing them myself, so sorry, I'm lazy. Paul, do you have any recommendations to do cost analysis between different cloud providers? For example, is there a heavy querying using group versus low usage split subscription for data warehouse? No, I don't have. I'm spoiled in that from that perspective that somebody else is paying my bills, and I'm not really a FinOps person where I work. So I'm not the one who goes after other people saying you spend too much, this is better, and so on and so forth. What I can say is that if cost is the primary motivator to for the choice where you're going to be, then just don't go to AWS, Google, and Azure. Go for DigitalOcean or Vultr or what else do we have? Civo, Scaleway, and so on and so forth. Linode. Kind of those are going to give you amazing cost benefits. But within the big three, I'm not sure myself, to be honest. Hey Santiago, thank you for the donation. And the question is, Flux or Argo CD and why? It's the hardest this versus that question I'm getting because typically I always have this is the best option for any specific use case. Argo CD and Flux, I'm divided. I like both. If you would put gun on my head and say you have to choose, only then I would answer, and I would probably say Argo CD, mostly because of the adoption. When I say adoption, I mean adoption both within end users. It has bigger adoption, at least the open source version, and adoption among other vendors. Others are investing more heavily or often very exclusively to Argo CD compared to Flux, mostly because of the relation that those projects have with open source ownership and stuff like that. So there are more vendors investing in Argo CD apart from having more users, which gives me a better peace of mind. But that's only if you put a gun on my head, then I choose Argo CD. Otherwise, both are great. How to restrict access to domain name to some public access, any tool to handle that on AWS. If you're talking AWS Kubernetes, then access to domain name to some public address, Service Mesh can do that for you. Gateways in general can do that for you. Any Service Mesh you pick should be able to do it. If you're talking about Kubernetes. If you're talking about not Kubernetes, I haven't done that for a long while, so I'm not sure. Ruben, I used Azure, GCP, and AWS, and can say that Azure is really crap. You said it. There are functions which are simply not working, and you will need to run command in CLI to accomplish the task. GCP, on the other hand, has an autopilot, which is really awesome. Yes, so my personal preference among the big three goes for GCP because I think that GCP strikes a balance between reliability and simplicity. It is arguably the simplest of the three, and it works really well. And it was designed, it was the last one to be designed, so it was designed based on some more current principles. Like GK is arguably the best managed Kubernetes cluster you can get among the big three providers, right? And things like that. But AWS is arguably the most reliable, kind of like you cannot go wrong with AWS, but you will suffer greatly to figure it out. And Azure is somewhere in between, right? Especially popular with big enterprises. But I know the rumor was, and I don't know whether that's still true or no. I know that was in the past, that even Linux servers on Azure are running as virtual machines on Windows servers. I don't know whether that's still the case. But yeah, my preference goes for GCP and AWS personally. Sai, how do we start a journey of automating deployments in AWS, config infra for existing resources for large-scale projects? The answer I can give you is crossplane. That question is one of the reasons why I chose to join the project and work in a company behind crossplane. Now, you can say that I'm biased. If that's the case, tough luck. So yeah, crossplane gives you that, among other things. I mean, but if you want a more general answer, infrastructure as code type of tool, anything related to AWS, like Terraform, Pulumi will do the trick. Now, yeah, I'm assuming that you're talking about infrastructure and configuration. Yeah. Now, yeah, I was about to say the differences, but I don't want to speak badly about competition. Jose, out of curiosity, which tool do you prefer to provision Kubernetes cluster for on-premises environments? I'm using KubeSpray actually, but tasks like upgrading big cluster, it's a pain. I don't work much with on-prem. So not the best person to answer that. Spoiled with, I have since fewer and fewer, but let's start with this. Where I work, we don't use on-prem. The companies I work with are mostly not on on-prem. So I would need to set up some home lab probably to get back to up to speed, since the last couple of years I haven't been much involved with on-prem. Sorry for that. Oh, DevSpace or Octeto. Maybe Octeto. If I have to choose one, maybe Octeto. Both are great. Both are absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, late this month, late in January, we're starting a new series on this channel that will explore all, and I'm repeating all, ALL, all CNCF projects, the relation between them, making the choices between them, and creating a drawing and instructions how to choose any combination of any CNCF projects, 200 plus projects. DevSpace will be one of them. Octeto, no, but not because it's not a good choice. It's an amazing choice, probably my preferable choice, but it's not CNCF. Any good motivational advice would you like to give? I don't know how to. My family complains all the time, saying that you have no empathy, you don't know how to motivate anybody and things like that. I'm usually person people dislike, kind of like, hey, why did you say that? Why are you so kind of like, can you be a bit more motivational, politically correct, and all those things? So I don't know. Not a motivational person. Quite the opposite. Vandal, rephrasing, infrastructure automation is becoming more and more used. Infrastructure as a service, infrastructure as code, serverless managed Kubernetes, etc. That means a lot less or no server management at all. What does that mean for DevOps? That means that we are just, for DevOps or anybody else, we are constantly moving into different, better ways of doing things. And that means that our profession, and I'm now not answering for DevOps, I'm answering in general because I think it equally applies to everything. As the technology moves, improves, and some things become commodity, some things become very simple in a way that anybody can do it, and then we move to the next step all the time, right? When infrastructure was concerned, it was the same question about, hey, bare metal servers in my own data center. And now we're getting virtual machines, right? What am I going to do now? Well, you're going to switch to manage virtual machines. And now you're switching to manage cloud resources. And those cloud resources are becoming, changing all the time. And we are adapting to that. That's all there is. It's just adapting. Now, if you don't adapt, then you're in deep trouble. But as long as you adapt to those changes, I don't see a problem at all. Now, I don't think that DevOps will be called DevOps for a very, very long time. It's becoming bloated, the term, but it will be called something else in the future, just as it was called something else before DevOps. No worries. As long as you know what you're doing and you're keeping up with the changes in the industry, you're fine, whatever you're doing. Abdul, sir, Python versus Go, future in DevOps automation, which one to learn?
Both.
Both, exactly. I think that if you're talking about automation, the correct answer is both, mostly because they serve very different purposes. I think that if you want something ad hoc, kind of something that is not good enough for bash script, and anything more than 50 lines in a bash script, I freak out. That should go to Python, kind of right away. Now, if you have a complex CLI that is kind of maybe commercial even, something really that is kind of real developed, we have a team behind it, then maybe Go, but different purposes. Learn both, yes. Actually, 3 of them: Bash, Python, and Go. Don't forget Bash. Still useful. Thank you so much, Gavali. I really, really, really appreciate it. Hello. If I want to give a cluster to some developers and provide them some tools like Caverno, Kubewell, etc., how can I forbid them to disable Caverno but keep admin privileges for everything else? You can, within Kubernetes itself, you can define privileges. What can somebody do? Kubernetes comes with RBAC. You can say, hey, this user is allowed to do this, is not allowed to do them. And that those privileges are set on resource basis. I mean, it could be wildcard, right? Depending on the type of resources, you can just say, hey, whatever is, first of all, you cannot touch the namespace Caverno or wherever Caverno is running. The whole namespace, you cannot touch it. And you cannot deal with resources based on Caverno API. As easy as that. Right. Now, if you want to go a step further, then just say, nobody can touch Kubernetes cluster, I'm using GitOps. Then it becomes even easier. Pradep, can you please throw some difference between Ingress controller versus API gateway? So they serve the same purpose, right? The same basic purpose, and that purpose is to get an incoming request, figure out where to forward it further. So I have a request, and then both Ingress controllers and API gateway are doing, and I'm talking on a very, very basic level, on a very rudimentary level. Hey, based on this header, this request is requesting something for this domain or this path, hence it should go here or it should go there, right? Now, traditionally, API gateways are more common outside Kubernetes cluster. And Ingress is soon to be replaced with Gateway API, which I assume is not what you meant by API gateway. Gateway API is a standardization that will replace Ingress, but conceptually, It's more about standardization than changing really drastically how Ingress works. So Ingress controller in Kubernetes, that's the thing you want to use. And further down the line, below Ingress, one kind of another, you might want to use service mesh to further tighten things. And API gateway usually outside Kubernetes, if you have things that are not Kubernetes related. Now, confusing part is that Ingress-like solutions in Kubernetes sometimes are called gateway something. Like Istio, there is Istio gateway, which is essentially Ingress. Oh, Santiago, thank you so much for the super sticker. Really appreciate it. Thanks a ton. Unpopular opinion. Folks tend to refer to tool project names instead of function. We should endeavor to describe our use case scenario to reduce confusion. Yes, I agree 100% with that. That's much better approach because then the answer is not limited, right? And potentially better because I had those problems when I was working as professional services consulting. People would ask me, "Hey, should I use this or should I use that?" And then I always had to stop them, kind of tell me what you want and tell me what you're trying to accomplish instead of asking me direct questions because maybe the question has a very, very wrong assumption in the first place when it's framed like that. Canico or Google Jib to build Docker images. First of all, it's not Docker images, it's container images. Docker is just an engine that runs. I know it's confusing, but we need to stop saying Docker image, it's a container image because if you build it with Canico, it's still a container image, right? Google Jib, I might be wrong terribly because I don't use it much, but Google Jib is for Java only, right? I think. And Canico is general purpose. Give me a Docker file, I build it for you. So I prefer general purpose kind of because almost nobody is a single language anymore. So Canico. Why it's so difficult to work with Azure in Terraform? I don't think it's difficult to work with Azure in Terraform. If anything is difficult for me personally, that's AWS. Mostly because every single service requires more moving pieces, more resources. Gives you more control though. Okay, at our company, we follow a standard of rehydratation, releasing and reprovisioning the worker nodes used by EKS. Do you think this is necessary? I'm not sure what you mean by releasing and
replacing.
reprovisioning the worker.
They're basically getting rid of all the worker nodes and doing worker nodes.
Yeah, I mean, it is necessary because even if you don't do it as part of some specific process, you will have to upgrade them sooner or later, right? And now I'm not sure whether there is a valid reason to do it outside upgrades. I don't think there is. And if there is a reason to do it outside of upgrades themselves, which will replace your nodes, then you might be looking into a different type of problem. Something, if there is a reason to kind of shut down the node every day or something like that, then you might want to look what's causing that behavior. I mean, it should be, shutting down the node should be an uneventful event, normal things, but not necessarily as on purpose as trying to solve some other thing. But if you let me know what is the reason for that, I might have a better answer. Okay, Victor, do you prefer to walk alone or prefer a group of peers to collaborate? I'm better alone. I mean, I work in a team. I spend tremendous amount of time speaking with my teammates every day. So, but when it comes to the work, like, I'm touching the keyboard, I'm producing something, then I'm better alone, right? I like being surrounded with people for help and for knowledge sharing and stuff like that. But when it comes to specific tasks, I prefer those tasks being separated in a way that they can be assigned to each individual person to own a whole task. What are your thoughts about artificial intelligence and things like GPT? How those can help DevOps to do the job? They can. And we are just at the beginning of that. And that will continue increasing. And I don't think it's anything new, to be honest. It's just becoming easier to use and better. To me, GPT and similar tools are a better version of Stack Overflow, right? Almost everybody I know, and I dare Darin to come back with his voice and say that he doesn't use Stack Overflow, or anybody I know. Everybody uses Stack Overflow to find a base for the solution of the problem that they are having, right? When I say Stack Overflow, it doesn't have to be Stack Overflow, but it's an example, right? And now we have a better mechanism to find those solutions, right? And that's GPT, or as I mentioned before, in my case, GitHub Copilot. And I think that they're great. The more I can fix on solving problems, instead of solving, problems kind of like, hey, this hasn't been done by anybody before, the better. Because the more of the tasks that are repeated over and over again, done by dozens or hundreds or thousands of people before me, if anything like GPT can help me do that, or at least speed that up, it's a great thing. Very welcome. I love it. I have a couple of Azure functions and looking into hosting them with Kubernetes. Should they explore OpenFaaS or Knative functions? Knative functions. A similar reason, like what was I talking about, like Nomad before? I don't think that OpenFaaS is great. Alex, basically the guy who started the project, is absolutely amazing. He's a great guy and he really knows what he's doing. But Knative functions is where the industry invests in, right? There are quite a few companies who are heavily investing into it, and so I know it's here to stay. And I know that they have funds and people, manpower to continue. So, Knative. How to copy jar file built using Git Actions runner to container. Copy command doesn't find jar, however, maven package shows it isn't. I mean, if copy command must find jar as long as you specify the path that is relative to the location of Docker file. So if the copy instruction should find the file. If it doesn't, then most likely either there is a problem with permissions or the path you specified is not correct. Okay, I think that we are getting to the, okay, 2 more questions. Brilliant, almost at the end. What do you think about everything on Kubernetes, such as data on Kubernetes? I believe it's getting more mature. It is. Databases are getting more mature on Kubernetes. Or you still prefer something stateful like that is not on Kubernetes? I think that we are getting, as time passes, more and more types of workloads are working well in Kubernetes. The initial idea behind Kubernetes, initial implementation, was mostly meant for stateless applications. Small applications, microservices type of stuff, and over time we're expanding to more and more types of applications, right? So yes, I see databases in Kubernetes becoming more and more of a thing. Now, at the same time, and this is me being very biased, I see Kubernetes more and more being control plane rather than only something that runs your containers. So I'm more concerned now how to use Kubernetes to manage resources, no matter whether they are containers, whether they are not virtual machines in Kubernetes cluster, virtual machine outside Kubernetes cluster, functions inside, outside, right? So but the answer is yes. Just don't start with stateful applications if you didn't move all stateless applications yet. Okay. Do we
We're at
have
the top of the
I
hour.
think that we're at the top of the hour. There are some questions I didn't answer. Sorry for that. You need to type faster. No, that wasn't a good comment. Anyways, see you next week. Next week we have a guest. I don't remember the subject for next week, but see you next week, Thursday. And don't remember, also see you tomorrow in DevOps Paradox, different channel, same crew, talking about the news of the week. Thank you so much. See you next time.